Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today for the launch of Astriid's new research results. We're bringing this video to you at a time when the conversation about long-term illness and employment seems to be hinged on economic inactivity, when here at Astriid we know that the issue goes far deeper than this and we want to get to the root of it. So with this report, we went directly to the people who are most impacted by this issue to hear about the barriers and solutions from their perceptions and also from Astriid's work on the front line. But before we dive into those research findings, I'm going to hand you over to Steve Schutz to tell you more about Astriid and how this organisation came to be.
Hello, my name is Steve Schutz and I'm an ambassador for the charity Astriid. The charity was founded by my brother at the end of 2017. David had been a career naval officer, a very successful one. He'd been awarded an OBE by the Queen, recognised for his services to the Navy. And then he went on to a career in business. But life takes unpredictable turns, and for many, like David, health conditions suddenly became a significant hurdle. As successful as he was in the pursuit of his dreams, when they collided with the harsh reality of health challenges, he founded Astriid to become a beacon of hope and empowerment for others in the same situation. Since that time, operating as a UK charity, Astriid has become a source of inspiration and transformation, connecting individuals battling long-term health conditions to meaningful work opportunities that not only provide financial stability, but also renew a sense of purpose and self-worth. Astriid recognises that each person's journey is unique, but the desire for fulfilment remains universal. This charity is dedicated to reshaping the narrative for those facing health challenges by emphasising their skills, their talents, and their untapped potential. Through our innovative platform, Astriid bridges the gap between those talented individuals and the organisations that are eager to tap into their expertise. But we don't just change individual lives, we impact communities and businesses as well. By fostering an environment where diverse talents are recognised and celebrated, Astriid's able to encourage businesses to embrace inclusivity as a driving force for innovation. As these companies open their doors to a workforce rich in unique experience and perspectives, they not only create job opportunities that are fulfilling, but also shape a brighter future for themselves and the individuals they employ. Over time, Astriid has developed expertise through experience, becoming leading providers of training, consultancy and research services that will help organisations to better understand the landscape for employment of those with energy-limiting health conditions and disabilities. Research findings have become increasingly prominent as government and business seeks to redress the inequalities that exist in our employment landscape. We would now like to share with you some of our key findings and conclusions in order to help you on your journey. So thank you for supporting the Astriid movement.
Now we're going to hand over to Katie Francis to share more information about the participants and some of the initial findings.
Our survey was open between February and April 2023. It was open to Astriid candidates and the wider public who identified as having a long-term health condition or disability. We had 414 respondents that met our sampling criteria of either selecting that they had an energy-limiting condition, an ELC, or that had selected limited energy or fatigue as a health-related barrier for them when finding employment. The chart here illustrates the multiple impairment challenges, physical, cognitive, emotional and social, reported by people with ELCs. We know from working directly with candidates that barriers to employment are complex and multifactorial. They typically involve interaction between health, including both physical and mental symptoms, psychosocial factors such as confidence, and structural factors connected to the way work is traditionally organised and socioeconomic and living conditions. We asked respondents about what health-related barriers they face. Fatigue or limited energy was selected by 98% of respondents. Fluctuating capacity selected by 89%. Cognitive fatigue, also known as brain fog, by 87%. And payback by 87%. These findings are crucial for understanding the relationship between work and health. They indicate that the lived experience of an ELC goes far beyond the surface notion of fatigue as a subjective sensation of tiredness. The impact of cognitive fatigue and dysfunction on everyday work-related tasks, like reading, communicating, and concentration span, show that an ELC not only limits capacity for jobs requiring physical exertion, but also many jobs in the knowledge economy. The fact that the pattern of many systemic diseases involves fluctuating symptoms and a varying capacity for work, often unpredictably, also forms a key barrier to many job roles. In a similar way, payback, in some conditions known as post-exertional malaise, the negative consequences of attempting to push through fatigue and ending up with exacerbated symptoms as a result, was also selected as a key barrier. The consequences of a line manager not understanding ELCs can be very damaging. One respondent said, "In a previous role, an admin role, my line manager was horrendous and did not understand my illness and the fluctuations that can occur on a day-to-day basis. She was unwilling to flex in any aspect of my role, be that working hours or location, and felt that work could only be completed in the office environment. In fact, when asked the reason for leaving their previous employment, or if they are employed but want to leave, 48% of respondents selected that working in their previous job made their health deteriorate. This demonstrates that pushing through symptoms of fatigue with an ELC is not a viable strategy for moving into or remaining in work. It also highlights the importance of raising awareness and training line managers on the experience of ELCs and other long-term and invisible health conditions. Although health is a key barrier to employment, other psychosocial and structural barriers play a significant role. We asked respondents about the types of barriers that could be addressed by bespoke support services like those offered by Astriid. 66% selected they are uncertain about what type or amount of work they could safely manage with their health condition, and 49% said they had a lack of confidence around access needs, rights, and self-advocacy. Some respondents felt like they needed to gain experience in a different role or sector to their previous work. We know from our work with candidates that some may need to change the sector they work in due to their previous jobs becoming inaccessible, for example, too physically demanding, or there not being enough opportunities to work from home. At Astriid, we're also aware of additional barriers that may be linked to a need for structural change and require other, more holistic support services. For example, 38% of respondents selected that they hadn't adjusted to the emotional impact of acquiring a long-term condition, and 32% said they faced mental health challenges. This evidences a crucial need for confidence building and job coaching services for this group that are informed by an understanding of the trauma of developing an LTC, and focus on rebuilding a new professional identity. There was also an open-ended response for this question. Barriers that came up were socioeconomic circumstances, living conditions, transport restrictions, having to manage regular medical appointments around work, and work history and reputation. Many of the barriers that came up during our analysis are those that organisations like Astriid can help with, and in turn meaningfully improve access to work for people with LTCs. This can be achieved in a number of ways, including confidence building and exploring the type and frequency of work which would be most suitable and accessible.
So, as we've heard there, people with long-term conditions face many multifaceted barriers to the world of work, and next we wanted to hear about what kind of solutions they would most benefit from. An overwhelming 89% of people told us that they would value an introduction specifically to an employer who understands long-term illness. And from our previous work at Astriid in this area, we know how much a simple introduction like that can make a difference. The other valuable support routes that people identified clearly pointed to the need for specialist employment support services, especially from people who understand the complexities of long-term illness. Other support routes that people identified in this area include help defining career goals, one-to-one mentoring from somebody who understands long-term conditions, finding inclusive work experience or upskilling opportunities, support with CV writing, and practice and confidence building for interview situations. But in addition to these things which can be provided by specialist employment services, there are all kinds of things that employers can do to support their employees in the meantime. Our data clearly shows that widening employment opportunities requires employers to challenge and think creatively about job roles. For too long, we've been trying to make a diverse range of people fit within a very standardised typical job role, when in reality, we need to think about this much more flexibly if we really want to get the best out of people and help them to work in a sustainable way. With regard to working styles, unsurprisingly, flexibility is key in this area. 84% cited the need to work from home, and 81% cited the need to have flexibility over their start and finish hours. A further 75% also wanted the ability to determine their working hours on any given week, to really have the flexibility to manage a fluctuating condition. Another valuable thing that can be really worthy to add to your policy or practice is to introduce the ability to take disability leave. This will enable people to attend routine medical appointments or treatment, because often people don't have any control over when these appointments fall, so that would mean that they wouldn't be penalised if they had to take these appointments during typical working hours. Although some people with long-term conditions can work full-time hours or almost full-time hours, 68% cited the need to have part-time or reduced hours, whether that's over the week or over the month. Another key theme that cropped up was the importance of employers understanding the impact of the cognitive side of long-term conditions as well as the physical side. Cognitive fatigue can be a really disabling symptom that affects so many people, so having an awareness of this and how to accommodate this, for example, being given interview questions in advance or having as much notice as possible when agendas or schedules need to change, that can really make a positive difference to a person's condition management as well. And finally, for this section, we must pay attention to what makes inclusive recruitment practice to start with, so I want to leave you with 5 golden rules in this area. Number 1, make sure you've stated the option to work flexibly in the job advert. 2, consider adding a statement in there as well about your organisation's commitment to equality and inclusion, because that's something that people with long-term conditions specifically look for. 3, make sure that you include any disability and inclusion information prominently on your company website as well, again because people do research this. 4, invite job applicants to state any access needs at the application stage of the process rather than waiting for the face-to-face interview. And 5, make sure you're aware of any access needs and you're ready to accommodate them at the interview stage. And in that way, you're going to ensure that you're being proactive rather than reactive. With these guidelines and our new report findings, you'll be much better equipped to find skilled people with long-term conditions for your roles and add diverse talent to your team. Now we're going to hand over to Catherine Hale to talk more about how these findings can translate into action and their wider implications.
Hi, I'm Catherine Hale and I lead our research and consultancy work at Astriid. I'm going to talk to you about why our research matters in the broader context and how we can use the findings to help improve employment prospects for people with long-term health conditions. So we hear a lot at the moment about economic inactivity, the rise in rates of economic activity due to people with long-term health conditions. And I'm the first to not like this term economic inactivity because it implies people are lazy or unmotivated. And there are myriad reasons why people with long-term health conditions may not be looking for work. Many of them are simply too ill to work, which means that their available energy on a day-to-day basis is taken up just getting through basic survival, really, tasks that non-disabled people take for granted. But then there are a whole other group, typically people we work with, who have, as we've seen, skills, qualifications, experience, and a real desire to work and to contribute to society, but are finding themselves locked out of the labour market, locked out of jobs. So ours was the first survey that I'm aware of that actually asked this group of people what the solutions are. And the answer is that it takes different sectors in society to remove those barriers that people told us about. So I'm going to be sharing our recommendations from our report to policymakers, to employment support providers, and to businesses. So our recommendation to government and policymakers is to strengthen flexible working legislation. We've seen good steps forward this year with the passing of the Employment Relations Bill that strengthens workers' right to request flexible working. But this really only benefits people who are already in a job. It doesn't do anything to attract people who are outside the labour market. So we would like government to place a duty on employers to state in a job advert when a role can be done flexibly, to state in the advert clearly what kind of flexible working provisions would be available within the role. This will mean people with long-term conditions can know in advance whether a role could work for them. Secondly, from government, we'd like to see more research and understanding of the relationship between work and health, especially for conditions where there are fluctuating symptoms, fatigue and energy limitation. We've seen that this affects such a broad group of disabled people. We'd like more understanding of the challenges that people are facing in work, the lived experiences and the strategies that people are drawing on to manage their health in a work situation, so that we can then understand how policies and support systems can support people to implement those strategies rather than working against them. We'd like to see employment support that's tailored to long-term and energy-limiting health conditions, that's designed by people with lived experience of those conditions. we've seen that one-size-fits-all disability employment doesn't work well for this group because disabled people are not a homogenous group. Secondly, our recommendations to employment support providers. We've seen from our survey that people are coming to us at Astriid because we provide a service that they're not finding in mainstream employment support services. And that is a personalised introduction to an employer who's already demonstrated a commitment to employing people with long-term conditions, who's already briefed to some extent on their circumstances. And this is because with invisible disability, which we typically deal with, issues of disclosure, the issue of whether to disclose, when to disclose, how to disclose through the recruitment process is such a fraught situation to go through. We've seen so many people have negative experiences and be demoralised and not be willing to go through that impersonal recruitment process again. So we're proud that our model at Astriid of employer engagement, job brokering, job matching is what people have valued the most about our service. And we'd like to see this rolled out more comprehensively in government funded employment support more generally. We've also seen that people come to us wanting support to come to terms with the loss of their previous role, wanting to help rebuild their professional identity. They need support to understand and advocate for their rights in an employment context. And they want support to manage their health once in a job so they can ensure they build their capacity in a way that's sustainable. And lastly, our recommendations to employers. We know that action from employers is absolutely critical to moving the dial on disability employment and on health-related economic inactivity. So here are just some of the highlights that businesses can take to make sure long-term conditions are included in your diversity and inclusion strategy. And if you're wondering, do we really need another strand of diversity work? Just think of this. According to the Work Foundation, 40% of the workforce will develop a long-term condition during working age by 2030. So we're a minority that's really too big to ignore. And I know that debates are raging about the value of working from home, whether versus the need to return to the office. And sure, there are merits on both sides of the argument, but wherever you as a business land in that hybrid landscape, you need to remember that for many disabled workers, working from home and other forms of flexible working are not a perk or a privilege that they need to earn. They're often a prerequisite to them being able to work at all. You may well need to adjust your policies around flexible working as a reasonable adjustment. And just as importantly, you need to remember that those working from home may be at risk of exclusion and inequality unless your processes for training, progression in work, promotion, those opportunities need to be available to all on an equal basis. And your workplace culture and your wellbeing activities need to include those who are working from home and those who are working part-time. And last but not least, training. We know that there's a huge knowledge gap that's often the biggest barrier between our candidates who are qualified for a role and a business who often wants to do the right thing and employ people with long-term health conditions. But there's this gap at the line manager level, recruitment manager level, for how to make that work. When we did a survey a couple of years ago, 86% of respondents with long-term conditions said that line managers lack the understanding of how to support them in a role. We recognise how it's not easy to get this right. And in fact, we know that a survey of businesses that had a diversity and inclusion strategy by Return on Disability Group found that only 4% had a included disability in that DEI strategy. And even within that disability spectrum, long-term and energy limiting conditions tend to get left off the agenda because they haven't been talked about as much as other disabilities. So our mission is pivoted to providing training and consultancy to businesses on supporting people with long-term conditions at work. Our training is developed and delivered by people with lived experience, expertise. And we're passionate about supporting businesses to not just recruit, but to support people with long-term conditions at work, and importantly, to retain your staff when they develop a long-term condition. Our offer includes interactive training workshops for up to 20 people, which can be delivered online or in person. Our introductory module is called Supporting People with Long-Term Conditions at Work. We also have a more specialised training workshop on inclusive recruitment, and our e-learning module is called Supporting People with Long-Term Conditions Through Flexible Working. Please get in touch about how we can support your training needs, and work together to make your workforce truly diverse and resilient for the future.
And finally, we're going to hear from subject expert Kim Hock, Professor of Human Resource Management and co-founder of the Disability Employment Charter.
Hello, my name's Kim Hock. I'm Professor of Human Resource Management and Vice Dean for People and Culture at King's Business School, and I'm a founder member of the Disability Employment Charter. I'd like to start by thanking the team at Astriid for giving me the opportunity to comment on their new research report. And I'd also like to congratulate them for the fantastic work that they do in connecting people with long-term conditions to meaningful work opportunities. From a personal perspective, I'd also like to thank Astriid for being one of the 150 plus signatories to the Disability Employment Charter. Now, a central focus of their new report, which is based on an impressive array of responses from over 400 individuals, is people with energy limiting conditions. Now, these conditions, which involve fluctuating capacity, cognitive fatigue and payback, which is where symptoms deteriorate following exertion, can be extremely debilitating. As the report highlights, around 4.7 million people in the UK have such conditions. So while we know that approaching a quarter of people in the UK of working age are disabled overall, energy limiting conditions are a really important part of this picture and cannot be ignored in broader discussions on disability. This in itself underlines the importance of the research Astriid has undertaken. What's also important about the research is its focus on the workplace barriers that people with energy limiting conditions face. Of course, a lot of government attention in recent years has been on the supply side in terms of how to get disabled people off benefits and into job-seeking activity. By contrast, not enough attention has arguably focused on the demand side, particularly in terms of the ways in which workplace environments need to become more flexible and accommodating. And the fact that Astriid's report focuses precisely on this issue is extremely welcome. What's encouraging, though, is that where employers are prepared to develop a genuine understanding of long-term conditions, solutions are possible, including, for example, the embedding of flexibility into job design and recruitment practices. 84% of respondents say working from home would help them access work. 81% highlight the importance of flexible start and finish times, and 71% emphasise the importance of being allowed to take breaks during the working day. What's important here is that these are all adjustments that any forward-thinking progressive employer could adopt if it wanted to, at least for some of their job roles. And of course, this is why wouldn't employers make these adjustments? After all, it will be good not just for people with long-term conditions themselves, but it would also be good for the employers, given it would give them access to a larger and more diverse talent pool. They'll be better placed to retain staff with valuable skills and tacit knowledge of the business. And it's this, of course, that will enable their businesses to grow. So once again, I'd like to thank Astriid for giving me the opportunity to comment on their report, which I'm sure will go a long way in highlighting to employers and policymakers the sorts of flexibility and adjustments that we should be encouraging employers to implement.
And with that, we've reached the end of today's session. So we really hope you've learned something new today. And don't forget, you can find plenty more powerful stats and lived experiences in the full Make an Employment Work report, which is now available to download from Astriid's website. It goes without saying, but working with a long-term condition is really tough. That's why it's so important that we're all working towards realistic solutions and being proactive, not only for the sake of the talented individuals who deserve that chance to thrive, but also to support businesses and organisations so that they can support and empower the people with long-term conditions who are already in their workforce, because there will be people in there who are already impacted by this. If you're a business or organisation and you're looking to upskill or become better informed in this area, Astriid Consulting is in prime position to help you. We offer all kinds of research and consultancy support, and we can tailor this to fit your specific organisation and the goals you're working towards. So if you want to find out more about this or get in touch with the team, visit the Astriid Consulting tab on Astriid's website. But for now, I think all that's left to say is thank you very much for your time today and for supporting Astriid, and we hope to hear from you soon. Thank you.